My name is J.D. Balakrishnan, and I'm the Associate Dean Academic, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this small celebration of our Calgary Youth Science Fair award-winning scientists. It might appear that what does the business school have to do with science fair awards, right? But the fact is, sort of deep down, we've been always working with scientists. I would like to congratulate the three recipients, Zoe there, Zoe Dingerman, there's Joe Willis is here, and Elizabeth Vanderput. Thanks to them for taking time off. Is it a school day?
Yes. Now, do each of you have a short presentation, I think?
Yes, around 7 minutes.
Around 7 minutes? Perfect.
So, for my project, I wanted to develop a gluten-free donut because I'm gluten intolerant and I have been for about 3 years. And also, during the winter break, I had gone to a Krispy Kreme donut shop and there were all those yummy smelling donuts. And also, I asked the person there if they had a gluten-free, and they said that 3 other people had asked the same day. And it's really challenging to make a gluten-free donut because gluten adds the binding to flour, and when you're baking cookies or muffins, you have that pan or tin there to hold it in, but when you're cooking donuts, you're just dropping it in oil. So I used 6 flours, and for each donut, I only used 1 flour to make it simpler, because usually with gluten-free items, there are like 6 different flours, and it's hard and complicated to bake at home. So I used corn flour, tapioca flour, potato flour, chickpea flour, white rice flour, and brown rice flour. So for the corn flour, it rose a lot, but the donuts were very hard to form and it's kind of sticky and liquidy. For the tapioca flour, it ended out way too liquidy to make donuts, so that was not possible. For potato flour, it ended up just in tiny little dough balls, and even when I would put all my pressure on it, it just would crumble apart. For chickpea flour, the dough was very sticky and firm, and it was very hard to make into a donut, so they came out like donut blobs, and they tasted like lima beans, so it was really unpleasant. For white rice flour, the flour didn't rise, but it held together very well. It didn't crumble, and it was easy to put in. For the brown rice flour, it didn't rise also, but the donuts were harder to form, and it had cracks, and it was more oily in the inside. So for my grading system for each donut, I used a rubric I developed because first before I started making gluten-free donuts, I tried just making normal wheat flour donuts, and I made an evaluation system based on that. So in the end, the white rice flour performed the best, but I still wasn't happy with the results because it was still firm and it was kind of dense. So I wanted to get the best, so I added white rice flour and corn flour into one donut because the corn flour rose and the white rice flour held together. The donuts came out oily and one fell apart and they weren't very good. So for my next donut, I did white rice flour, corn flour, and xanthan gum. Xanthan gum is very regularly used in gluten-free baking because it works as a binding agent, kind of as a replacement for gluten. So those turned out very well. They exceeded my expectations, getting 5s in all categories. And yes, so thank you for your time.
There are recipes there for gluten-free donuts as well, so I'm going to try one myself. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So my project's Decarbonize Alberta, and it was on reducing Alberta's carbon emissions, because on this chart right here, which is content of electricity versus price, you can see we have it's pretty dirty and cheap electricity, so I figured we needed a better way of that. And I chose nuclear kind of before I even started the project, mostly because it's very energy dense, and it has a great safety record. So for the fuel, most of the conventional reactors use uranium-235, which is 0.7% of all natural uranium. But I decided to use thorium, and it can be used more efficiently in reactors. So thorium can't be fissioned directly, so it needs to be bred. You fire a neutron at thorium-232, becomes thorium-233, which in 22 seconds becomes protactinium-233, which in 27 days becomes uranium-233, which can be fissioned directly, creating 2 more neutrons to continue the chain reaction. And for spent fuel, most people think spent fuel is a problem, but it's actually really useful. For example, most of the spent fuels can be used in medical diagnostics, and iodine-131 can be used in treating thyroid cancer. So they have a lot of use for them. Also, because I'm using thorium, you can use them more efficiently, and you can reuse spent fuel because our modern day reactors are only 3% efficient, but the main problem is we have such old reactors. So for radiation, most people think there's a real difference between man-made radiation and just natural radiation, but there actually isn't. There is 3 types of radiation: alpha, which can't penetrate through a piece of paper; beta, which can't penetrate through aluminum; and gamma, which basically penetrates through everything, including lead, although lead does slow it. So alpha is the most dangerous and gamma is the least dangerous, but even the smallest amount of radiation needs to be respected. And by the standards they judge current nuclear reactors, they should evacuate areas like Denver, and bananas shouldn't be legal. So the elephant in the room when talking about nuclear is the nuclear reactants, like Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island, and Fukushima. Although these were all different designs and locations, they all have a few things in common. They were all caused by human error, and they were all high-pressure reactors. As well, they were all very old designs. Chernobyl was caused by misinterpreting instructions. 3 Mile Island was caused by confusion over the position of a human-operated relief switch. And Fukushima was caused by being overcautious with the tsunami. And on the desk per terawatt hour of electricity, you can see even though all these accidents, nuclear is still the safest, and ironically it's safer than wind and solar. So I believe the solution is nuclear because of its energy density and safety record, but I don't believe in the reactors currently in use because they're inefficient, they take a long time, and they're very expensive to build. So I chose LFTR, the liquid fluoride thorium reactor, because it's at atmospheric pressure, so in the event of a meltdown, you don't have gas buildups, which cause 3 Mile Island and other things. Well, they basically all cause the accidents is because of lack of coolant. And as well, it uses molten salt, and that's why it's able to be at atmospheric pressure, because it has a boiling point of 1300 degrees Celsius, and the reactor won't ever get that hot, even in a meltdown. And it's walk-away safe. Well, walk away. You still probably don't want to walk away on an active reactor. So you have a freeze plug at the bottom, which is made of salt, not of ice, because of how high the temperatures get. And so in the event of a meltdown, it will get too hot to cool this block right here. And so all of the coolant and the fuel will be put into a dump tank where they can be safely managed. As well, there's different designs that are meant to be easier and more efficient, but I like that version of LFTR because it's modular. You can make them either very large or massive. They range from about the size of a pickup truck to a skyscraper. And then I have the economy, and because nuclear is baseload power, it doesn't work too well in areas with a lot of solar. You can see this is a California duck chart. It has a bit of a belly right here because of how much solar, and that's a prediction of how much solar they have right now. This blue line is the actual. And so nuclear could only run at the bottom of the belly, and it's not very useful. But because Alberta doesn't have much solar, we have the Alberta whale chart. And so it can run at the bottom of the tail, which is a lot more power. And so there's not too much left over for natural gas or renewables. And the typical Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland generation stack you can see nuclear turns on at about $50.88 per megawatt hour, which is bulk. We pay about double that. And nuclear can run at about $20 per megawatt hour. So and on the EROI, it's energy returned on invested. So it returns 75 times the amount of energy invested into actually getting fuel and all that. And the economical threshold is 7.5 times. So the economics of running a nuclear power plant in Alberta won't be a problem. And the oil sands, because we provide 10% of Canada's energy and so much jobs and money, we need to keep them running. But at the same time, they also are a lot of our emissions, and they plan on getting worse. So I was thinking we could use nuclear to do that. And so on the energy to produce 1 barrel of oil sands oil, you can see thorium, it takes about 6 grams to produce a barrel of oil sands oil, 159 liters about. And it takes 12,000 grams of coal instead. So there's a very large difference. And even if you exaggerate these numbers, for example, we were extracting 60 million barrels of oil a day, you can still hardly see how many kilograms of thorium we would need compared to coal. And so my conclusion of the project is that fission is safer than burning. We can decarbonize Alberta, and nuclear power can be the baseline for at least the next millennia. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was an incredibly interesting project, and I don't know about anyone else, but I want to know when I come around later to talk to you why we need to evacuate Denver and why bananas. I'll be asking. Thank you. And Zoe, would you like to tell us about your project?
Sure. So basically what I did was I made an algorithm that can accurately predict cooking times, or alternatively give the user suggestions for how to adjust oven temperature to achieve their desired cook time. The way that it works is first you would put your input values into the control panel. So that would be the type of meat that you're cooking, the shape of it, mass, length if it's cylindrical, start temperature, desired end temperature, and then oven temperature, along with the recommended cooking time based on the recipe that you're following. Given that, and then a table, thermodynamic properties according to which type of meat you indicated you're cooking, it calculates the heat transfer coefficient that the recipe assumes that piece of meat has. The way that it does that is it first calculates dimensionless time and dimensionless temperature, and then using that calculates the Biot number, which is dimensionless heat transfer coefficient. Given the Biot number, it would pull from a table a lambda and an a value, which are just constants according to that. And it would calculate the error term and then run that on GoalSeek until that error is minimalized. And the actual heat transfer coefficient is found for the recipe. So that is used to plot that line right there. So that's basically the cooking pattern that the recipe is assuming it will follow. After you do that, you have your oven preheated and you put I used a thermocouple. You put the thermocouple into the center of the meat and start cooking that. So you run this phase until there's a significant change in temperature. So that's when it starts to follow a logarithmic trend, which you can see right there. After that, you would stop recording the data and input it into your computer. And it would use that segment to do a nonlinear regression. So that's the black line that's shown here. The nonlinear regression is then used to extrapolate and find the actual cook time that's required to achieve your desired center temperature. Given that new time, it can calculate the correct heat transfer coefficient for the meat rather than the one that the recipe assumes it has, and use that to solve for oven temperature as opposed to cook time. So you could input the cook time that you would like for the item that you're cooking to have, and then it would output the new oven temperature that you should change your oven to. Given this revised temperature, you put the thermocouple back in and then measure how accurate it was. So I ran 4 trials to date, 2 of which were simple prediction and 2 where I actually adjusted oven temperature. The ones where I did predictions had very high R-square values, so they were both around 0.99, and they were off by just 1 or 2 minutes, which when you're cooking something for 3 hours, is pretty good. The ones where I adjusted oven temperature were slightly less accurate. They were off by approximately 10 or 15 minutes. The reason for that is that it takes a while for the oven temperature to change, and also the meat is continuing to cook or undergo conduction at the rate that it was before. So in order to make that more accurate, I would simply need to take account that conduction, take into account the time that it takes for conduction to change. After that, you can save the data that the algorithm finds to your log, and then use that later to load those start conditions for a similar piece of meat in the future and get a more accurate prediction from the start, as opposed to using the one from the recipe, because recipes tend to overestimate due to food and health safety concerns. Yeah, so you can see right here, that's the segment that it actually followed, so it was quite accurate. That was just a simple prediction one, though. So in conclusion, essentially using this algorithm to predict oven temperature and to find oven temperature adjustments to achieve your desired cook time is feasible. And for in the future, I'd hope to make those changes to the algorithm to make the temperature adjustments more accurate, and to develop this into the form of an app so that it's more user-friendly, implement the use of a Bluetooth thermometer so that you don't have to stop and load the data at that halfway point, and in the long run, implement it into the oven itself. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
An app, and I'm hoping that it's going to help me bake what I fondly call my trench cake better, so it's not actually a trench cake. So I hope you get going on that app soon, because I'm really using it. Thank you so much. That's very interesting. All of them are incredibly interesting, and I'm hoping that everyone will stay and take a look at the project and ask a few questions. So thank you very much for being here, Elizabeth and Joe and Zoe. Thank you.
I guess this first part was definitely more science and programming.
And then that's just a close-up of how they ended out.
They actually look like they would taste good, like they look fluffy.
Yeah, that's what I wanted. Like, with the white rice flour, it was really kind of dense inside, and it wasn't, I didn't like it that much.
Should be like
Fluffy.
kind of a thing, yeah. Fluffy.
Yeah, they kind of ended out hard, and
yeah, these ones look better.
yeah.
Trials where I just did prediction had R-square values of about 0.99. So they're off by 1 or 2 minutes. Yeah. The ones where you're adjusting oven temperature were off by about 10 or 15 minutes, which when you're cooking something for 3 hours is pretty good. The reason for that is just the time that it takes for oven temperature to change, and then convection rates going at the prior oven temperature.
It's tens and hundreds of millions of dollars to do anything?
That's why the plans is for oil sands, because they're already used to making very large, risky investments. Then they have to wait 10 years to get their money back.
Yeah.
And also they're modular, so you can get like a quarter of a reactor and ship it on the bed of a pickup truck.
Yeah, but you got to convince people to do something different.
Yeah.
When they spend billions of dollars and they convince them to do something different, it's not always all that easy.
China, they're actually taking their time a little bit. They're building all the factories and stuff. So once they have one done, they're planning to get like 2 a year and start selling them to the rest of the world.
Yeah, I've been in the nuclear valley in northern China. I've been there. It's big.
Salt is right up there. It was like when I took it out, it was sticky and it smelled really bad.
It's a really heavy flour, isn't it?
Yeah, and you can even see the donuts. They were like strands, and like it was really weird for frying. And also, they tasted like lima beans.
So that is what was actually measured?
Yeah, so you can see that that's off by quite a bit.
Yeah.
You run that until it starts to follow a logarithmic trend, and take that, let it run for a bit, then stop and take that segment, you import it, and then it does a nonlinear regression with that. So that's the black line, and then it extrapolates to predict the actual cook time that it'll take to get to the desired end temperature.
that's what you.
Yeah, so that part,
didn't need to do.
the part where you're just recording that, doing the regression, and then predicting, that's already been done by a couple different kinds of thermometers. Where it gets a little bit more interesting is when you take that new cook time.